Humanity's quiet entrance. The Galactic Assembly Hall was a masterpiece of architecture, an intricate blend of designs from the countless civilizations that had formed the United Galactic Council. Pillars of crystalline light rose into a dome of pure energy, casting a soft, shifting glow over the room. Delegates from hundreds of star systems sat in tiered rows, their expressions a mix of despair, exhaustion, and quiet fury. For centuries, the Council had been the ultimate authority in the galaxy, a body that resolved disputes and maintained peace among its member civilizations. But the rise of the Korthan Empire had shattered that peace. The Korthans, a militaristic species with an insatiable appetite for conquest, had swept through the galaxy like a plague, crushing fleets, burning colonies, and leaving entire planets lifeless. Now, the Council was on the brink of collapse. Ambassador Litra of the Velara Compact, a tall, elegant being with flowing translucent skin that shimmered like liquid crystal, stood at the central podium. Her voice, amplified by the hall's acoustics, trembled as she addressed the assembly. "We cannot ignore the reality any longer," she said, her multifaceted eyes scanning the room. "The Korthans will not stop. They have no interest in negotiation. We have lost over a third of our member worlds, and our fleets are scattered. If we do not act decisively, the Council will cease to exist." Murmurs rippled through the hall, a cacophony of voices representing fear and anger. Delegates from the Orlok Dominion, the Xenderan Confederacy, and the Valrix Alliance argued loudly, their voices overlapping in a chaotic din. At the back of the hall, shrouded in shadow, sat the human delegation. They had arrived late to the Council, only a few decades ago, and had remained an enigma ever since. Unlike the other species who sent their finest ambassadors and representatives to these meetings, humanity had always kept a low profile. They rarely spoke, and when they did, their words were blunt and pragmatic, devoid of the poetic diplomacy that other species favored. Now, as the galaxy burned, the humans sat silent, watching. The Korthan delegate, a massive reptilian figure clad in ceremonial armor, hissed in derision as he stood. His scales gleamed like polished metal, and his yellow eyes glowed with cruel amusement. "You speak of acting decisively," he sneered, his voice deep and resonant. "But your council is weak. Your fleets are in ruins. Your armies crumble before us like dry leaves in a storm. There is no action you can take that will stop us." The hall fell silent, the delegates too stunned or terrified to respond. It was then that a voice broke the stillness. "We disagree." It was a simple statement, spoken calmly, but with an edge of steel. Heads turned toward the human delegation, and for the first time, the assembly focused on the representatives from Earth. The speaker was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a simple gray uniform. His features were weathered, his dark eyes sharp and unwavering. He stepped forward, his boots echoing against the polished floor, and stood at the central podium. "Who are you to disagree?" The Korthan delegate growled, baring his fangs. The man met his gaze without flinching. "General Marcus Hayes," he said, representative of Earth and commander of its armed forces. The Korthan hissed in amusement. "Your ships are primitive. Your armies are small. What makes you believe you can stand against us?" Hayes smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. "Because you don't understand us," he said. "You've fought species that abide by the rules of war, who engage in battles with honor and follow protocols. Humans don't fight that way. We don't fight to prove a point or to negotiate terms. We fight to win." The hall erupted into murmurs again, but this time the tone was different. The delegates were intrigued, their fear momentarily overshadowed by curiosity. Hayes continued, his voice calm but firm. "You see us as primitives because our technology isn't as advanced as yours. But war isn't about technology. It's about adaptability. It's about outthinking your enemy, using every resource, every advantage, every weakness to achieve victory. And you, Korthans, have a fatal flaw." The Korthan delegate snarled, his yellow eyes narrowing. And what flaw is that, human? Hayes leaned forward slightly, his expression hard. You're predictable. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Litra, who had been watching the exchange with growing interest, finally spoke. General Hayes, are you suggesting that Earth has a solution to this war? Hayes turned to her, his gaze steady. I'm suggesting that if you give Earth full strategic authority, we can end it. The hall exploded into chaos. Delegates shouted in disbelief, their voices overlapping in a storm of protests and questions. The idea of handing control to a single species, especially one as unproven as humanity, was unthinkable. Litra raised her hands, her voice amplified over the din. Order. We will have order. The delegates quieted, though their tension was palpable. You claim you can end this war, Litra said, her tone measured. But at what cost? The council was founded on principles of cooperation and restraint. What you propose, it sounds like annihilation. Hayes' expression softened, but only slightly. Annihilation is what the Korthans have been bringing to your worlds, he said. You've seen what they do to their enemies. They don't stop. They don't compromise. The only way to defeat them is to hit them harder and faster than they can recover. That's what humans do best. The Korthan delegate laughed, a guttural sound that echoed through the hall. You speak boldly, human, but words mean nothing in war. Hayes turned to him, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. Then let us show you what humans can do. The hall fell silent again, the weight of his words pressing down on everyone present. Litra looked at the other delegates, her crystalline features reflecting their collective uncertainty. Finally, she spoke. Very well, General Hayes. The Council will grant Earth strategic authority for 1 month. But understand this, if you fail, it will not just be Earth that pays the price. It will be all of us. Hayes nodded once, his expression unreadable. We won't fail. As he turned and walked back to the human delegation, the Korthan delegate watched him with a mixture of amusement and unease. For the first time, the predators of the galaxy were beginning to wonder if they had underestimated their prey. Humanity's first move. The atmosphere in the Galactic Assembly Hall was thick with tension. As General Marcus Hayes left the podium, the delegates from countless star systems exchanged uneasy glances. Handing strategic authority to humanity felt like placing a fragile alliance in the hands of a storm. They were entrusting their survival to a species most of them had written off as reckless newcomers. But humanity's reputation for adaptability, its audacious unpredictability, now seemed like the galaxy's only hope against the unstoppable Korthan onslaught. The Korthan delegate, a towering reptilian figure named Kraltor, sneered as he observed the human general's retreat. This council has made a grave mistake, he hissed to the delegates nearby. These humans will not save you. They will hasten your extinction. No one dared to respond. The fear of Korthan wrath had long since silenced their voices. But far from the assembly hall, in the shadows of interstellar space, the humans were already at work. The Phantom Fleet. Humanity had no grand armadas. Its ships were not the imposing dreadnoughts or sleek cruisers of the galactic powers. They were smaller, less advanced, and lacked the visual intimidation of their alien counterparts. But what humanity lacked in technological grandeur, it made up for in creativity and ruthlessness. On the bridge of the UNS Revenant, Captain Elias Rourke watched as his fleet assembled in the dark expanse of space. The ships were painted in matte black, designed to reflect no light, to remain invisible against the cosmic backdrop. This was the Phantom Fleet, humanity's answer to an enemy that believed war was about strength and numbers. Status report, Rourke said, his voice calm and steady. Fleet is in position, replied Lieutenant Mira Cade, her fingers flying over the holographic controls. All ships are cloaked and awaiting orders. The drones have confirmed the Korthan supply convoy is exactly where we expected. Rourke smiled faintly. It was a predatory smile, devoid of mercy. The Korthans had always relied on brute force, overwhelming their enemies with massive fleets and direct assaults. But brute force required logistics, fuel, weapons, food for their soldiers. Without their supply chains, even the most fearsome armies would crumble. "Begin Phase 1, Rourke said. From the shadows, the Phantom fleet moved. The first strike. The Corthan supply convoy drifted through the vacuum of space, its massive transport ships escorted by a handful of warships. To the Corthans, this route was considered safe. It was deep within their territory, far from the front lines, where no enemy had ever dared venture. But the humans didn't care about boundaries. The first explosion was silent. In the vacuum of space, there was no sound as one of the Corthan warships erupted in a brilliant flash of fire and debris. The convoy's escort ships scrambled to respond, their sensors searching for the attacker. But there was nothing to find. The Phantom fleet remained invisible, its ships cloaked and silent. Another explosion. Then another. Panic spread through the Corthan convoy. The warships fired wildly into the void, their energy beams lashing out at empty space. The humans watched from the safety of their cloaked ships, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. "Target their lead transport," Rourke ordered. A single human missile streaked through the darkness, bypassing the Corthan defenses with precision. It struck the lead transport dead center, splitting the massive ship in two. Inside the convoy, chaos reigned. The Corthans were not used to being hunted. They were predators, not prey. But now, as their ships burned and their crews panicked, they realized they were facing an enemy that didn't fight by their rules. And it terrified them. A message in blood. When the Phantom fleet was finished, the Corthan convoy was no more. The once mighty warships floated as lifeless hulks, their broken forms drifting aimlessly. The transport ships, carrying vital supplies to the Corthan war effort, had been reduced to rubble. It was not just a military defeat, it was a psychological one. Captain Rourke stood on the bridge of the UNS Revenant, watching the wreckage on the tactical display. "Leave a message," he said. Lieutenant Cade nodded, activating the ship's comms system. The humans transmitted a simple signal on all frequencies, one that would be picked up by the Corthan fleet when they arrived to investigate the destruction. The message was a single image, the emblem of Earth's military, surrounded by a field of stars. Below it, in bold, simple text, were the words, "We are here. The Council reacts." The news of the Phantom fleet's first strike reached the Galactic Council within hours. The destruction of a key Corthan supply convoy was unprecedented. It was the first significant victory against the Corthans in years. Ambassador Lytra sat in stunned silence as the human report was delivered. The other delegates murmured in disbelief, their expressions a mixture of awe and unease. They struck deep into Corthan space, asked a delegate from the Tsenduran Confederacy, his voice trembling. "Yes," Lytra said softly. And they succeeded. The Corthan delegate, Kraltor, slammed his clawed fist onto the table, his fury barely contained. "This changes nothing. One convoy is meaningless. Your humans will pay for their arrogance." But Lytra noticed something in Kraltor's eyes, something she had never seen before. Doubt. For the first time, the Corthans were questioning their invincibility. And for the first time, the galaxy had hope. The art of war. In the void of space, where stars shimmered faintly in the distance, the aftermath of the Phantom fleet's strike lingered like a grim morning. The wreckage of the Corthan convoy drifted in silence, a testament to humanity's calculated ruthlessness. This was not the grand spectacle of galactic war, with massive fleets colliding in explosive chaos. No, this was precision. This was terror. And the galaxy was starting to notice. Corthan command in chaos. Far from the front lines, in the Corthan High Command Citadel, Supreme Commander Viraka stood before a massive holographic display. It showed the wreckage of the destroyed convoy, each destroyed ship marked in a dull red on the tactical interface. Around him, his generals murmured nervously, their usual confidence replaced with unease. "This is impossible," one of the generals muttered, a towering figure with dark, jagged scales. No species has ever dared strike this deep into our territory. They didn't strike, Veraka said, his voice low and cold. They dismantled. He turned to face his generals, his yellow eyes glowing with a fury that made them shrink back. This was not an act of desperation. This was deliberate, methodical. They are not fighting us as equals. They are hunting us. The room fell silent, the weight of his words pressing down on them. Supreme Commander, another general said hesitantly, these humans, they fight differently. We cannot detect their ships, their strategies are unconventional, and their technology. It seems crude, yet it outmaneuvers us. Veraka's claws scraped against the metal table, leaving deep gouges. They are primitives, he growled. But they are primitives with nothing to lose. That makes them dangerous. One of the younger generals hesitated before speaking. If we cannot predict them, perhaps we should prepare for total war. Veraka's gaze snapped to him, and the young general fell silent. No, the Supreme Commander said, we will not panic. They are few, they are weak, and they will break like all the others. But deep down, even Veraka could feel the first cracks in his confidence. The humans strike again. The humans strike again. Meanwhile, aboard the UNS Revenant, Captain Elias Work reviewed the next phase of their plan. The Phantom Fleet was scattered across Corthan space, each ship operating independently yet in perfect coordination. Their mission was not to engage in battles. It was to make the Corthans bleed, slowly, methodically, and without mercy. Recon reports are in, Lieutenant Mira Cade said, pulling up a holographic map. We've identified 3 key targets: a fuel depot in the Vrakis sector, a weapons manufacturing station near Trelloc 9, and a troop transport fleet en route to the front lines. Rourke studied the map, his sharp eyes scanning the data. Hit them all, he said simply. Cade raised an eyebrow. Simultaneously. Rourke nodded. They're scrambling to respond to us. Let's make sure they never catch their breath. The Phantom Fleet moved like ghosts. Small, stealthy ships darted through the vast expanse of space, invisible to Corthan sensors. They struck in unison, each blow as precise as a scalpel. The fuel depot in the Vrakis sector exploded in a chain reaction, lighting up the void like a small supernova. The weapons manufacturing station near Trelloc 9 was reduced to rubble, its automated defenses overwhelmed before they could even fire. But it was the troop transport fleet that suffered the most. The Corthan soldiers aboard the transports were seasoned warriors, hardened by years of conquest. But they had never faced anything like the humans. The Phantom Fleet didn't engage them directly. Instead, they targeted the ship's engines, leaving them adrift in the cold emptiness of space. Then came the final touch. The humans broadcast a simple message across all frequencies. You are not safe. Surrender or be erased. The Council watches. Back at the Galactic Council, Ambassador Lytra sat in stunned silence as the reports of the humans' actions poured in. The other delegates were equally speechless, their usual bickering replaced by an uneasy quiet. They've crippled 3 key Corthan operations in less than a day, said a representative from the Xenduran Confederacy, his voice trembling. This is unprecedented. Ambassador Trelos of the Orlok Dominion, a grizzled veteran with a body encased in cybernetic enhancements, leaned forward. They're dismantling the Corthans' war machine, he said, his tone a mix of awe and dread. Not with fleets or armies, but with precision. With fear. Kraltor, the Corthan delegate, was livid. His claws gouged the armrests of his chair as he glared at the holographic display of the latest human strikes. This changes nothing, he roared. The humans are nothing more than cowards, skulking in the shadows. They will not face us in open battle, because they know they will be destroyed. Lytra turned to him, her crystalline features unreadable. Perhaps they don't need to face you in open battle, she said quietly. Kraltor hissed, his eyes narrowing. What are you implying? She met his gaze, her voice calm. "I'm implying that they are winning." The Korthans' growing fear. In the days that followed, the Korthans began to feel the full weight of humanity's unconventional warfare. Supply lines vanished. Strategic outposts went dark. Vital resources disappeared without a trace. And the humans left no survivors. Korthan commanders found themselves questioning every move, every decision. Was this convoy safe? Was that outpost secure? Paranoia began to spread through their ranks, eroding the iron discipline that had once made them unstoppable. For the first time, the Korthans were no longer the hunters. They were the hunted. A war like no other. As the Phantom Fleet continued its campaign, the galaxy watched in awe. Humanity's tactics were brutal, efficient, and utterly alien to the other species. The Korthans had expected resistance, but they had never expected to face an enemy that didn't fight by the rules. And now, as the Korthan Empire began to falter, one thing became clear. This was no longer a war. This was an extermination. The breaking point. The Korthan Empire, once a symbol of unyielding strength and conquest, was beginning to fracture. Across the galaxy, their fleets scrambled to react to the humans' relentless strikes. Supply lines vanished overnight. Vital resources disappeared. Entire outposts fell silent. The humans had not only shifted the tide of war, they had shattered the very foundation of the Korthan war machine. The fall of Korthan outpost Theta Prime. On the barren moon of Theta Prime, one of the Korthans' most critical outposts lay buried beneath a shielded fortress. From here, they coordinated fleet movements across the sector, secured vital intelligence, and maintained a strategic foothold over nearby systems. Theta Prime was impenetrable, or so the Korthans believed. Above the moon, cloaked in the darkness of space, the UNS Revenant and its strike group waited. The Phantom Fleet had been watching Theta Prime for days, studying its patrol patterns, analyzing its defenses, and probing its vulnerabilities. "Captain Rourke," Lieutenant Mira Cade reported, her tone sharp. "Theta Prime's shields are running on a rotating cycle. There's a 3-second gap every 5 minutes where the energy grid resets to avoid overheating. It's barely enough time to slip a projectile through." Rourke smirked. "Barely enough time is all we need. Load the disruptor missile. Target their main reactor core." The bridge crew moved with precision, their faces lit by the cold glow of the holographic displays. They had done this before. They would do it again. The countdown began. Firing in 3, 2, 1. The missile streaked through the void, its sleek form slipping through the gap in Theta Prime's shields with uncanny precision. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a silent explosion rippled through the fortress, and the lights across the outpost flickered and died. "Shields down," Cade confirmed. "Send in the strike teams," Rourke ordered. From the UNS Revenant, small dropships launched, their cloaking systems rendering them invisible to the naked eye. They landed silently on the moon's surface, releasing squads of human operatives who moved with lethal efficiency. Inside the fortress, chaos erupted. Korthan soldiers scrambled to respond, but the humans were already inside, cutting through their defenses like a knife through cloth. The battle was over in minutes. Theta Prime fell, its command systems ripped apart, its databanks wiped clean. The Korthans' foothold in the sector was gone, and humanity left behind a message carved into the ruined walls. "You are not safe." Korthan morale crumbles. News of Theta Prime's destruction spread quickly. For the Korthans, it was more than a loss. It was a humiliation. Their empire had always thrived on fear, their reputation as an unstoppable force ensuring that few dared to challenge them. But now, the galaxy saw them for what they truly were, vulnerable. Across Korthan-controlled space, whispers of doubt began to grow. Soldiers questioned their orders. Warlords argued over how to respond. The Supreme Commander's once iron grip on his empire began to weaken. Even the Korthan civilian population, long shielded from the realities of war, could no longer ignore the cracks in their leader's facade. The humans were no longer just an enemy. They were a nightmare, an unstoppable force that struck from the shadows and disappeared without a trace. A desperate gambit. In the Korthan High Command Citadel, Supreme Commander Verakka convened an emergency council with his remaining generals. The holographic war map displayed a grim reality. The humans had reduced their empire's supply chains to rubble, isolated key fleets, and dismantled strategic outposts. "This cannot continue," Verakka growled, his voice heavy with rage. "We must draw them out, force them into open combat, where their tricks and shadows will not save them." One of his generals, a scared veteran named Rektal, spoke cautiously. "Supreme Commander, the humans do not fight as we do. They avoid confrontation because they know they cannot match us in strength. They will not engage unless it is on their terms. Then we will give them a reason to engage," Verakka said, his yellow eyes narrowing. The room fell silent. Rektal hesitated before asking, "What are you proposing?" Verakka leaned forward, his claws gripping the edge of the table. "We will strike at their heart, Earth." The council responds. At the Galactic Council, Ambassador Litra and the other delegates were already receiving reports of the Korthans' new plan. The proposal to attack Earth was a desperate gambit, one that could change the course of the war. "They're trying to bait us," Litra said, her crystalline features reflecting the dim light of the council chamber. "They want humanity to respond recklessly." General Marcus Hayes, who had returned to the council after overseeing the Phantom Fleet's operations, shook his head. "They'll find Earth isn't as easy a target as they think." Litra turned to him, her multifaceted eyes narrowing. "Are you suggesting you anticipated this?" Hayes smirked. "We didn't just anticipate it. We've been waiting for it." The trap is set. Far from the Council's deliberations, humanity prepared for the Korthan offensive. Earth was not the undefended world the Korthans believed it to be. It was a fortress, surrounded by layers of orbital defenses, cloaked fleets, and planetary shields. But humanity's true weapon wasn't its technology, it was its strategy. As the Korthan fleet began its approach, the Phantom Fleet moved into position, hidden in the darkness. They did not plan to defend Earth in a traditional sense. Instead, they would use the Korthans' arrogance against them. "They're walking into a trap," Captain Orcs said, watching the tactical display aboard the U.S. Revenant. "Let them come closer. Let them think they've won." And when the Korthans entered the final phase of their assault, humanity would strike back. The tide turns. As the Korthan fleet approached Earth, their confidence began to grow. The humans had not yet responded, and it seemed as though the galaxy's bold newcomers had finally run out of tricks. But then, just as the Korthans prepared to launch their final assault, the Phantom Fleet revealed itself. From the shadows of space, human ships emerged in perfect coordination, their weapon systems already locked onto their targets. The Korthans had no time to react. The first volley crippled their lead ships, and chaos spread through their ranks. It wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. And as the remnants of the Korthan fleet tried to retreat, they found themselves surrounded. The humans had outmaneuvered them at every turn. By the time the dust settled, the once mighty Korthan fleet was nothing more than debris scattered across the void. The breaking point. For the Korthans, this was more than a defeat. It was the end of their dominance, the collapse of an empire that had ruled through fear and force. And for humanity, it was proof that they were no longer newcomers to the galactic stage. They were its new masters.